Hi folks, this is Andy here again from the Journey Network here in Inverness in the Highlands of Scotland. I wanted to share with you about what I was reading in the book of Judges. I came across the story of Gideon, and I've read it many times, and I love the story of Gideon. I love the story of actually God, how he uses the weakest things to bring about glory to his name. And I often think, sometimes when we're involved in ministry, we think more about ourselves and what our reputation, and we think more about how important we are and what we can accomplish and do for God. And I think that's the wrong way to be. In fact, I know it's the wrong way to be, because I know that God doesn't need our strength. He doesn't need our talents. He's not looking for our abilities. In fact, God works best through yielded, weak vessels like you, like me. And that's what we should be. See, God's not particularly interested in furthering our ministries. He's interested in his kingdom coming and his will being done here on earth as it is in heaven. And that's what I want to talk about today. We get an example here in the book of Judges in chapter 7, where we see Gideon is about to go into battle, and he's gathered 32,000 people to go into battle. And I love what God says about that, because you would think, well, 32,000 people, it's a fair number to go and see victory and to accomplish victory for God. In Judges chapter 7, it says, "Then Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all the people who were with him, rose early and encamped beside the spring of Harod. And the camp of Midian was north of them by the hill of Moreh in the valley. The Lord said to Gideon, 'The people who are with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hands. Lest Israel boast about themselves against me, saying, my own hand has delivered me. So now proclaim in the ears of the men, saying, whoever is fearful and trembling, let him turn back and depart from Mount Gilead.' And 22,000 of the men returned, but 10,000 remained." And you think, well, that's quite a whittling down. God will use the 10,000. But no. It says in the next verse, "And the Lord said to Gideon, the men are still too many. Bring them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. And he of whom I say to you, this man shall go with you, shall go with you. And he of whom I say to you, this man shall not go with you, shall not go." So he brought the men down to the water. And the Lord said to Gideon, "Everyone who laps up the water with his tongue, as a dog laps it, you shall set by himself. Likewise, everyone who bows down on his knees to drink." And the number of those who lapped, putting their hand to their mouth, was 300 men. But all the rest of the people bowed down upon their knees to drink water. And the Lord said to Gideon, "With the 300 men who lapped, I will deliver you and give the Midianites into your hand. Let all the others return, every man to his home." So the people took provisions and their trumpets in their hands, and he sent all the rest of Israel, every man to his home, and retained those 300 men. And the host of Midian was below him in the valley. It's quite incredible. Whittled down from 32,000 to 300 men. And you think, well, that's going to be quite a task for 300 men to accomplish. Well, it gets better. You see, God is basically saying, I don't need your strength. I don't need your confident men. Because out of the 10,000, 9,700 of them were confident, still confident enough not to look around them when they were drinking, still thinking, we've got this, we can do this. But the 300 who were a bit more skittish and a bit more aware of their surroundings, that they were in enemy territory, they were more afraid of the circumstances they were in. That's why they drank the way. They were keeping a lookout while they drank. And you think, well, God's going to use just those 300 men. Yes, he does. But he makes it even clearer that he doesn't need them to fight the battle. He's going to accomplish the victory without their ability. All they have to do is do what Gideon does, what Gideon tells them to do, and what Gideon does. It's kind of like Jesus saying, I don't do anything I don't see the Father doing, and I don't say anything I don't hear the Father saying. It's the same principle. Let's read on. It says, that same night the Lord said to Gideon, arise, go down against their camp, for I have given it into your hand. But if you fear to go with Purah, your servant, down to the camp, and you shall hear what they say. And afterward your hand shall be strengthened to go down against the camp. And then he went down with Purah, his servant, to the outposts of the camp of the armed men. And the Midianites and the Amalekites and all the sons of the east lay along the valley like locusts for multitude. In other words, there was loads of them, right? And their camels were without number, as the sand on the seashore for multitude. When Gideon arrived, behold, a man was telling a dream to his comrade. And he said, behold, I dreamed the dream, and behold, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian and came to the tent and struck it, so that it fell and turned it upside down, so that the tent lay flat. And his comrade replied, well, this is nothing else but the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, a man of Israel. Into his hand God has given Midian and all the host. And when Gideon heard the telling of the dream and its interpretation, he worshipped and returned to the camp of Israel and said, arise, for the Lord has given into your hand the host of Midian. Now, here's where it gets interesting. He divided the 300 men into 3 companies, and he put into the hands of all of them trumpets and empty pitchers with torches inside the pitchers. So in one hand the trumpet, in the other hand a torch with a jar over the top, a clay jar. And he said to them, look at me, then do likewise. When I come to the edge of their camp, do as I do. When I blow the trumpet, I and all who are with me, then you blow the trumpets also on every side of the camp, and shout for the Lord and for Gideon. So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came to the outskirts of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, when the guards had just been changed, and they blew the trumpets and smashed the pitchers that were in their hands. And the 3 companies blew the trumpets and shattered the pitchers, holding the torches in their left hands, and the trumpets to blow in their right hands. Here's what the Amplified says, leaving no chance to use swords. They had a trumpet in one hand blowing, and they had the torch with the pitcher in the other hand. They couldn't even grab their swords. That's how much God didn't need their ability to fight, didn't need their ability to make this victory happen. They couldn't even grab their swords. All they had to do was what Gideon told them to do. Say what I say, do what I do. That's it. And that is still the same for us today. The Holy Spirit is leading us and guiding us. And he wants us to do what he asks us to do and say what he asks us to say. We don't need to fight the battle. The battle has been accomplished. We don't need to, God's not looking for our ability, our confidence. We can do this. We've got this. We know how to make this work. We know how to get the victory here. We know this. Actually, God didn't even allow them to use their swords. Their hands were filled with other things. So they could not take one jot of glory. Those 300 men couldn't even go back and say, yeah, I lifted up my sword and I did this. No, because they didn't even get a chance to use their swords. They just did what God asked them to do. And here's what happened. It says, they stood every man in his place round about the camp, and all the Midianite army ran. They ran, they cried out, and they fled. When Gideon's men blew the 300 trumpets, the Lord set every Midianite sword against his comrade and against all the army. And the army fled as far as Beth Shittah towards Zerah, as far as the border of Abel Meholah by Tabbath. It's incredible what God can do when we will yield to his leadership. He's not looking for my ability. He's not looking for your ability. He's simply looking for our obedience. He doesn't need our gifts, abilities, and talents. Our natural attributes, he may use them, but he doesn't need them to accomplish what he wants to do. We have to understand we get the privilege of being part of his plan, but we have to do what he asks us to do and say what he asks us to say. If you want to see God's will being done and God's kingdom coming, it doesn't require my ability or your ability. It doesn't require our natural attributes. All of it will come through God. But we have to listen to the Holy Spirit and obey him and do what he asks us to do and say what he asks us to say. Thank you, my brothers and sisters, for listening and watching this. May God bless you all.